Anastasia Novykh, Sensei, the Primordial of Shambhala. The original of this book, as well as other books by Anastasia Novykh, is written in the Russian language. It must be understood that everything that is subject to translation of these books into other languages is no longer the original as such. These are rather translations of meanings and understandings of those people who make these translations in an attempt to convey this information to others. The truly cognizing ones read these books only in the original in order to understand not only its primordial meaning, but also the impressive power and the spirit of the truth of this book. At first glance, the story of a youth finding wisdom seems naive, but this ordinary perception is just an illusory barrier, a skillful trap set by our ego on the path to discovering the perfect spirit. The one who overcomes such a trap will discover more than he would dare to hope for. Hail to the winner, because knowledge will be his prize and the secret will become a reality. This book was written based on the personal diary of a former high school girl in her senior year, reflecting the events of 1990-1991. The phenomenon of the creativity of Anastasia Novykh is that everyone sees, like in a mirror, something of his own, purely internal. The Sensei, the Primordial of Shambhala book reveals the inner world of a 16-year-old girl who suddenly finds herself face-to-face with death. This prompted her to rethink her life and to search for answers to eternal questions. Why does a person live? What is the meaning of life? Who am I really? Why are most people on earth believers? After all, if they believe, that means they are hoping for something. How do the great ones achieve inner immortality? What is hidden behind the concept of the essence of human? The unbridled energy of her inner search leads her to a meeting with an unusual, highly erudite man, a master of martial arts, and a very mysterious personality, Sensei. Impacting one to the depths of the soul, Sensei's extraordinary worldview, his fascinating philosophy and knowledge about the world and a human being, dynamic martial arts, the wisdom in everyday situations, the alternative medicine and ancient spiritual practices, including effective techniques of fighting negative thoughts, the phenomena of human capabilities. The heroine comes to know all this and much more by coming into contact with Sensei's world. But most importantly, she finds the answers to her main inner questions and learns from her own experience that humans have been granted the most powerful creating force from above, the power of faith and love. Prologue. The silent, warm summer night was well underway, relieving the bustling day of its tiresome activity. Its deep, dark veil was calming, sweetly lulling all living beings and slowly submerging them into a deep sleep. Its charm didn't only affect the hearts of those in love. For them, eternity passed as an instant. On the seashore, in an uninhabited place, a lonely fire crackled, casting mysterious shadows. A formless creature sat alone in its presence. Its only witness was an infinite universe, brightly illuminated by starlit worlds and the moon, inviting eternity with its silvery, sparkling path on the water's surface. All around there was a stillness that even the sea wouldn't dare disturb with the noise of its waves. Time seemed to stop, losing all meaning. It was the moment of eternity. The creature started to move, making strange sounds, and slowly divided itself into two separate parts. Human voices could be heard in the air saying, "God, life can be so good sometimes in this sinful world. Honestly, I don't even want to leave. That's what I'm telling you." The fire was blazing brightly, jealously trying to occupy some space in the night. Its luminous glares with varying success were first swollen by the darkness, then fearlessly cast far ahead, illuminating nature with its natural tones. So, what will your decision be, Rigdon? My conclusions are, of course, sad, but I think it's still worth waiting a little while for a final decision. I suppose it's worthwhile to remain here for some time. It's not all that bad. What's more, since you've decided to stay, give them another chance and let me... Suddenly, from out of nowhere, A light breeze flew over the sea, breathing life into the moonlit path, which charmingly sparkled with its silver hues, leading the way into a hazy distance. It was as if nature was teasing the creature, embracing it on the one hand with its eternity, and on the other hand, with its natural earthly beauty. Apparently, some innermost mystery known only to itself was hidden in this delicate gust. Chapter 1. It is no secret that destiny guides us through a complex journey of interrelations, natural phenomena, and intricately bound paths of occurrences and coincidences. At the very end, it leads to a tangible event, a final crossroads in life's path. And here, a human may dare to hope that he is given a chance to choose. But the same implacable power of destiny, through a series of logically bound circumstances, unnoticeably helps a person to make his own choice. Because a chain of events, according to its plan, inevitably should draw people together, people who don't yet know each other and who, living in their own small world, don't even suspect it at the moment. But this convergence will make them work together, mutually seeking the same goal, generating a great number of key events in the lives of other people. I shared the same fate. I was born in a remote Russian village. My parents were in the military, fulfilling their duty in an honest and fair way. That is why their command, in the same honest and fair way, was sending us into different parts of our boundless motherland, the Soviet Union. That's how our family got to Ukraine, the country of blooming chestnuts, where we settled down in rose-scented miners' land. I should say that I'm quite an outgoing person with various interests. It was never a problem for me to find a common language with new people. That's why my persona quickly joined a group of like-minded individuals in my new home. Together, we visited different hobby groups, including ballroom dancing, going to the cinema, cafe, and the theater. In general, as they say, my life took its normal course. Everything was great, but up to a certain moment. Because destiny has its own plans. Unexpectedly for my relatives, and especially for me, at the very peak of my youth, destiny threw me into a vortex of such difficult trials that I almost died in it of complete hopelessness and an animalistic fear of death. Chapter 2. At the beginning of my last school year, I began having chronic, strong, and long-lasting headaches. My parents took me for a checkup. The doctors only discussed the results with them, which made me very apprehensive. It gave rise to a number of concerns that, one after another, started to torment my soul. The complete uncertainty was the worst thing of all. And all those circumstances were terribly scary until, by chance, I overheard my mother's conversation with a doctor. But there must be a way out. Of course, there's always something that can be done. You see, this small tumor can grow progressively larger over time, and that's very dangerous. It's best to operate now before it's too late. By the way, there's a very good clinic in Moscow that specializes in these kinds of problems. They have excellent specialists. The only problem is that it's hard to get an appointment there. The waiting list is scheduled for years in advance, and the girl needs the operation as fast as possible. Otherwise, it's hard to predict the development of the disease, especially if it's a brain tumor. Sometimes people can live a year, and sometimes even longer. In any case, you shouldn't lose hope. Maybe you have connections that will help you get in there. I didn't listen to the rest of the conversation. Only one phrase was pulsating in my head. 1 year, and the end. Emptiness and hopelessness gripped my soul. The noisy hospital fuss gradually faded out, giving way to a rising whirl of thoughts. I will die in the prime of my life, but I haven't even started to live. Why me? What have I done to deserve this? I was in utter despair. Tears streamed down my cheeks. It became unbearably stuffy in this hospital tomb, and I ran to the exit. The doctor's voice was ringing in my ears like a threatening echo. 1 year. 1 year. 1. The fresh air hit me in the face with its dizzying aroma. Little by little, I came to my senses and looked around. The rain had just fallen, and the trees stood as if in a fairy tale, with brilliantly sparkling pendants. Purity and renewal was shining all around. Warmth from the ground covered the asphalt with a light haze, creating a surreal impression. God, how wonderful the beauty of nature was. This natural beauty that I had never noticed before now gained some new meaning, a new charm of its own. All the small problems that had brought me so many worries every day now seemed to be so trivial and stupid. With bitterness and anguish, I looked at the bright sun, the fresh green grass, cheerful birds flitting, and I thought, how foolishly I have spent my life. It's a pity that I didn't have time to do something really worthwhile. All previous resentments, gossip, vanity, all lost their meaning. Now all those around me were lucky people, and I was a prisoner in a death castle. For some time, I was terribly depressed. I lost interest in school, everyday life, and all of my previous hobbies. I avoided my parents, locking my bedroom door and indifferently turning pages of books and magazines. I really wanted to cry on somebody's shoulder to tell someone how afraid I was of dying before I had even started to live. My closest friend was, of course, my mother. But how can a mother's heart endure such a soul-wrenching confession from the lips of her own child? One day, sitting at the table, alone with my heavy thoughts, I took up a pen and described all my feelings on a piece of notebook paper. I felt a lot better. Then I started a diary. Afterwards, it would become my best friend, a friend that patiently endured all my thoughts about my extraordinary destiny. The only thing that distracted me from my gloomy thoughts was communication with my friends. Of course, I didn't tell them anything about my disease. I didn't want to see them with mournful eyes and faces full of condolence like my parents had. That would have killed me once and for all. Their funny chatter amused me. They discussed problems that seemed to me a complete absurdity in this life. Now I looked at everything in the light of some kind of a new vision, with jealousy of a person who must leave this mysterious, still undiscovered world in his heyday. Something inside me had definitely changed and broken down. Chapter 3. When my friends finally managed to drag me out to the cinema from my voluntary home imprisonment, I was surprised to find that I started to perceive things completely differently, even movies. It was around the time when martial arts started to come into fashion. In new cafes, they showed the most popular martial art hits for a ruble or 3. The mastery of the athletes, unusual cases of their self-recovery, their will and their spiritual power intrigued me. Of course, I knew that it was all acting. However, I couldn't stop thinking that many scenes were based on real phenomenal facts from the history of mankind. This inspired me to search for articles, books, and magazines on the subject. My evident interest in these phenomena spread to my friends. With relentless passion, they began searching for rare books wherever they could. Amazed by the extraordinary capabilities of these people, and by the depth of their understanding of this world, I felt that it had awoken some kind of internal power in me, a kind of hope, or vague anticipation that death of my body wouldn't be my end. This insight so touched and inspired something inside that my depression started to lift and I somehow felt a new taste for life, even though my mind, like before, was aware of inevitable death because few people had ever recovered from cancer. But with the new understanding, that didn't dispirit me and didn't cause fear. Something inside me simply refused to believe it. And what's most interesting is that it unconsciously started to resist my heavy, dark thoughts. This new feeling made me revisit my life again and contemplate how foolishly I'd lived it. Although I hadn't done anything bad, it was absolutely obvious that every day, every hour, I was justifying my own selfishness, excusing my own laziness. I wasn't striving to know myself, but was rather striving to gain more prestige in society through this knowledge. Or, to cut a long story short, in all my life, through my studies and family life, only one thought was hiding behind it all. Me, myself, and I. And the realization that this small bodily empire of me was coming to its big end, that is, to its real death, awoke all that animal fear, horror, despair, and hopelessness that I had been experiencing so intensely in the last couple of weeks. I realized that death is not as fearsome as its foolish anticipation, because in reality, it's not the bodily death you are waiting for, but the crash of your egotistic world, which you've been working so hard to build throughout your life. After this realization, I clearly understood that the life I had lived and what I had done is a sand castle on the seashore, where any wave will wash away all my efforts in a second, and nothing will be left, only emptiness, the same emptiness that was there before me. It seemed to me that most people waste their lives with sandcastles, meticulously building them, some closer and some farther away from the coastline. But the result will inevitably be the same for all of them. One day all will be destroyed by the wave of time. But there are people who sit on dry land and impartially observe this human illusion. Or maybe not even observe but look beyond it, at something eternal and unchanging. I wonder what they think about. What is their inner world like? After all, if they have comprehended this mortality, it means that they have realized something really important, something really worth spending their life on. These questions began to worry me more than anything else, but I didn't find answers to them. Then I turned to the book sources of major world religions of humankind. However, the great figures, such as Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, were those who had already been observing from the shore. But how did they get there? It's written everywhere, by concentration, faith, prayer. But how? Explanations of their followers were so confusing, so odd and veiled, that my brain was falling asleep when my eyes were making the effort to read the same words 10 times over. The teachings of those geniuses were interesting, but they only reflected the common truth of all mankind. Perhaps the essential grain of knowledge was hidden in between the lines. But, alas, I was just an ordinary human being, not an initiated one, so I wasn't able to grasp it with my mind, although the reading of certain lines did evoke something inside of me. Then a new question arose. Why are there so many people in this world who believe? If they believe, it means they hope for something in the future. In all world religions, there is life after death. Even after throwing away the shell of legends and myths, there lies the possibility that there really is something. But what? How does it express itself? How does it manifest itself? I tried to get deeper into the paths of religion, but just got more confused. The only thing that I understood was that there is one thing that unites all the world religions. It is the power of people's faith, their aspiration to know God and themselves. And to my surprise, I discovered that phenomenal people who managed to achieve the initial real results on their path were searching for the very same thing in their cognition. And in fact, many of them did not belong to any religion. They were just intelligent and talented individuals. So what is it all about? Why is such a phenomenon inherent in human nature? What's behind it? There were plenty of questions, but too few answers. That gave me cause to search further. Gradually, everyday life was getting back to normal. Moreover, some unusual courage started to arise in me because, in my case, I had nothing to lose. Therefore, I had to quickly fulfill all my desires. If I spend every remaining day productively, that could make up for my whole life. Arming myself with such a motto, I started to look intensively for literature of interest. I played sports, caught up with school, and attended different hobby groups. All my days were completely filled up and I didn't have time to think about the bad. Even though the headaches reminded me of the worst, despite them, I kept eagerly searching and attempting to learn everything new that I wasn't aware of or didn't know how to do. While my parents were trying to find different loopholes in order to get into the Moscow clinic, my unbridled aspirations brought me to study Kung Fu. Our group didn't miss any films about our Eastern martial arts heroes, and with a sinking heart, we watched the triple somersaults, overturns, undercuts, and jumps of these sportsmen. And when they started to open wushu schools in our town, where they were actually practicing Kung Fu, our group was overtaken by the thrill of battle once and for all. We visited one school after another. But in the first school, the teacher was too angry and ignorant. In the second, the teacher considered himself to be practically Bruce Lee. even though he was only teaching ordinary wrestling mixed with boxing. In the third, the guy was simply a cheater and a drunkard. We were looking for a teacher who would be like the heroes we had seen in the Eastern martial arts films. And as they say, the one who seeks will always find. But what we found was more than unexpected. It surpassed all of our ideals, even in our dreams. Chapter 4. After a few unsuccessful visits to several schools, we were told to try a school located on the outskirts of our town, near an old mine. We didn't believe that we would see anything better than what we had seen in the town center, but something was definitely drawing us there. After spending half a day questioning a great number of locals, we finally found it. Indeed, my friend Tatiana confessed in a low voice, this place is certainly quite scary. If we are going to be practicing here, I will die from fear. I already have goosebumps. I too felt a slight shiver even though the weather was quite warm. Approaching a dilapidated old building blooming with moss, even always silent Slava couldn't keep quiet. Well, I think we've just wasted our time. Don't tell me that someone trains in this hole. I bet only mice practice here at night. Andrei, whose face and figure were slightly reminiscent of a Russian version of Schwarzenegger, concluded, generally speaking, the outside form always corresponds to its contents. It's very likely that now we'll find proof of that once again. And pulling the handle of a worn-out door, he heard crafty words cited by Kostya with regret. Oh, how notably within you still sits a scientific nerd. With loud laughter, we rushed into the gym, but our cheerful mood quickly changed to mute amazement because inside there were around 60 people. Wow, Slava whistled. This is something else. But I wasn't listening to my friend's puzzled remarks. My eyes were immediately fixed on a fair-haired man. Even though he was no different from the others standing in the crowd, something about him intrigued me. God, his face looked so familiar, I thought. His appearance reminded me of someone I knew well a very long time ago. But who? I started to dig deep in my memory, recalling all my friends from different cities, my numerous relatives and their friends. But all my attempts were in vain. I was awoken from my wild stream of memories by the melodic voice of Sensei, the teacher, who turned out to be that mysterious young man. So, newcomers, he said with a smile, why do you stand like a girl after her first kiss? Here you either practice or leave. It's your choice. That voice, I was so amazed. For sure I'd heard his voice before. But where and when? Our small group went to the locker rooms. All the while, buzzing thoughts continued to demand satisfaction of their useless curiosity. Getting ready for the training, I tried to ask other people around me about Sensei, to find out where he was from. But it turned out that nobody knew anything for sure. That intrigued me even more. Unlike slow Tatiana, I quickly put on a white kimono and went to the gym, hoping to find more answers there. But there, I only found more questions. What struck me at first was the fact that there were people of all ages, from 14 to 50 years old, and that was strange by itself. I hadn't seen anything like this in any previous school. My persona thought, what can unite so many people of different beliefs, ages, and life experiences? If it's only martial arts, then what kind of master and psychologist do you have to be in order to attract and keep all of them interested? When the training began, the second thing that struck me was the ideal discipline and friendly atmosphere that surrounded us. Nobody here forced anybody to do anything, but no one ever thought of breaking the discipline. Everyone sincerely tried to do their best, and that was astonishing in comparison with our previous unfortunate experiments. Our group tried to show our best sides, intensely puffing, groaning, and sweating. But even during this activity, painful as it seemed for my badly trained extremities, one thought didn't leave me. How was it possible to create such discipline without, as they say, carrot and stick? What have all these people found here for themselves that they train their bodies with such enthusiasm? And why do they all train in silence? My feminine mind finally rebelled. Why won't anybody say at least one word? For my curious, talkative nature, this was a complete disaster, but I hoped to gain at least something during the training. After the warm-up, we heard 3 strong claps from the senpai, senior disciple. It was a kind of signal. People started to form a circle and sat with their knees on the floor. When everybody sat down, the teacher calmly made his way to the circle center. He began to tell the history of the tiger style as if he were telling it not to the crowd of disciples, but to his old friends. For the first time, I learned that the tiger style is the only style that preserved its original martial spirit without any changes. It appeared in China. One of the Shaolin masters observed the behavior of tigers and created his own style, distinguished from the others by greater aggressiveness and danger. The style has no sportive roots. Its martial spirit was passed from a teacher to a disciple, changing his consciousness to the level where he begins to feel and to think like a tiger. By its wisdom, it's only inferior to a more ancient style called dragon. "All right, theory is just theory, it's time to warm up a little," Sensei said. He called 3 fighters, strong, tall, athletic guys to the tatami, and demonstrated a couple of defense and attack techniques from this style. First, he showed the moves at speed that the real blows, as he considered, were happening. Honestly, I and probably many others too didn't even notice when the teacher struck the blows. All that my eyes could record was the fact that Sensei passed by 3 fighters and waved his hands for a fraction of a second. I didn't even realize what had happened until they fell. The same thing happened during the demonstration of defense techniques. The speed of the blows seemed to be unreal to me. And my brain, unwilling to comprehend that, suggested artfully. Maybe they fell down on purpose, probably pretending. But it was impossible that the men's expressions, distorted by pain, were faked. Sensei approached them calmly and helped restore their breathing by poking his fingers into some points on their bodies. After that, the boys were able to recover from pain and shock and continue the training. That entire scene was accompanied by silent contemplation of the amazed crowd. After this, the teacher started to explain the technique of the tiger style in detail, slowly showing each movement and the targets for the blows. I thought that these movements would be too complicated to have time to strike blows in a fraction of a second. Having split up into pairs, people did their best and repeated diligently what they had just seen. A plump man of about 50 years old was puffing not far from me, comically ejecting his short hands and legs. His face, with chubby, bulged-out lips, looked like a big dumpling and was neatly shaved. His wise eyes looked through thick glasses. A small bald spot, with errant hairs turning gray, was shining on his head. And how did he get in here? I thought. It would be hard to believe by his appearance that he has been practicing martial arts all his life. What is he looking for here? Has he decided to master kung fu in his old age? My thoughts were interrupted by Sensei's voice correcting the attack technique of a pair of young, strong boys near me. "Who strikes like that? What are you doing, Valentin Leonidovich? You are a future doctor, aren't you? You should understand why you strike, where you strike, and what is going on during this process. Your goal is to cause a painful shock, not just to flap your hands. A blow should hit the exact location of the nerve or nerve plexus. It should be momentary, instantaneous. The faster the better. Why? To cause a spasm in the muscle tissue. In turn, the transmitted nerve impulse through reflex channels of the nervous system will cause intense irritation of the nerve knot, which will inevitably lead to inhibition of a certain part in the brain cortex. In other words, the man will fall into a kind of a stupor caused by the shock of pain." A crowd of curious guys began to gather around him during this conversation. Sensei continued to explain. But the blow should be delivered taking into consideration that every human being has his own anatomical peculiarities. That's why not everyone will be affected by an ordinary blow to this anatomical point. So in order to be 100% sure, you should strike not with a straight tsuki, blow, but a blow with a twisted fist at the moment of contact, so that the blow goes deep inside. As a result, a large damage zone will appear. This strike goes into the point between the diaphragm and the solar plexus. Why exactly there? Because at this point there passes one of the 12 pairs of cranial nerves, the so-called nervus vagus, or the vagus nerve. It not only passes that point but also forms the nerve plexus, which forms two vagus trunks close to the esophageal opening. And what is the vagus nerve? It is, first of all, innervations of respiratory organs, the digestive system, the thyroid and parathyroid glands, adrenal glands, kidneys. It also takes part in innervations of the heart and vessels. Therefore, the correctly delivered blow to this point causes an intense irritation of the nervous system, which temporarily distorts functioning of the cerebellum. And the cerebellum, as you know, is responsible for coordination of all movement functions. A person is momentarily disoriented. In other words, it means that you have time to make a conscious decision, for example, to deliver another blow or to run away. The last remark caused a lot of smug smiles on the faces of the surrounding people, including myself. What? To run away? I thought to myself dreamily. If I've just dealt such a powerful blow, I wouldn't chicken out, that's for sure. At this moment, the teacher looked at the smiling crowd and said seriously, "And why not run away if that's the best way out in this situation? In some cases, it's a lot better to get hit 10 times in your own face rather than to take somebody's life." His words made me flinch and turn red, ashamed by my own egoistic thoughts and megalomania. With bitterness, these words brought me back to the tough reality of my existence. "Because human life is invaluable," Sensei went on, "your objective is to cause only a muscle spasm, a painful shock, in order to prevent an undesirable development of the situation. And in no way should you injure internal organs, break ribs, or anything else. That is, you should not cause serious after effects to your opponent. That's why we spend so much time here, in order to master the right technique of blows. Otherwise, if you deliver a powerful, uncontrollable strike, it is possible to cause great harm to the body, or even death. And what's the point? You should respect human life because one day you may happen to be in his place. Or maybe one day he will save your life. Because it is very likely that when you are in trouble, it will be this human who will appear to give you a helping hand and save you. Because life is unpredictable, and anything might happen in it. Even the most unbelievable things that you cannot imagine." Throughout the rest of the training, my persona was very impressed by this peculiar, easily understood lecture of profound anatomy and unusual philosophy. It completely captured my thoughts, and from time to time, I found myself thinking about what I had heard. 3 claps from the senior senpai meant the end of the training. When everyone traditionally lined up, he commanded, "Dojo ni rei," which means a bow to the martial spirit of the sports hall, "Sensei ni rei." The teacher also politely bowed in response and said, "We'll meet as usual at the same time. And now whoever needs to change and whoever needs to stay." Oh boy, and who needs what? Who stays? I want to stay too, I thought to myself. But the majority ran in single file to the changing rooms, carrying me along. Running past Sensei, I saw the chubby man in glasses approaching him. "Igor Mikhailovich," he said to the teacher with respect in his voice, "concerning our previous conversation. Here, I brought something for you to—" I couldn't hear the rest in the noise of laughter and the jokes of the guys running close to me. In the women's changing room, a storm of emotions already began to roar, caused by the discussion of the most vivid moments and Sensei's explanations. All this was happening amidst women, putting on many layers of clothes on their wet bodies. A girl with bright curls was changing next to me. Getting acquainted with her, I asked, "Have you been training here for long?" "No, only for 3 months." "And does he often tell and show such things?" "Well, probably when it's necessary. But when he is in a good mood, he shows much more. Today was nothing out of the ordinary." Not so bad. Nothing out of the ordinary, I thought to myself. I can't imagine what something special would be then. What style is he a master of? The tiger? Not only that, I've heard from the senior guys who have been training here for a long time that he has perfectly mastered the dragon, snake, Wing Chun, cat, mantis, and monkey styles, and a whole range of other styles that I just can't remember. I gave her a distrustful gaze. When did he have time to master all that? He looks like a young man. People sometimes spend their whole life mastering just one style. I was also surprised at first, she went on, but the guys say that, according to the teacher, a young body is not at all an indicator of the age of the soul. My new acquaintance answered, shrugging her shoulders. Who is he then? I started to become nervous, and my old thoughts, together with this new information, once again began tormenting my unsatisfied curiosity. An ordinary man, I heard in reply. Once we had changed, our group crowded before the exit and contemplated with admiration the unusual technique of a couple of athletically built guys who were training with the others who had stayed. I'd never seen such genuine, naturally beautiful undercuts, overturns, and nimble, smooth withdrawals, even in movies. But what struck me the most was the speed of their movements. Is it really possible to move at such speed and still be able to orientate yourself so well in space? I thought to myself. Nice work. And where is Sensei among them? Sensei turned out to be sitting quietly aside, looking through a pile of papers and books with bookmarks, presented by Dumpling. Two more men were sitting nearby, carefully listening to the teacher's explanations. Then Dumpling unfolded a yellowed map, and all four leaned over it as if it were a priceless treasure. Sensei started to mark something on the map with a pencil, constantly commenting and explaining it. I really wanted to get my curious nose in there, but we were gently pushed by tall guys trying to get out. Hey guys, why are you standing here? Don't you know the law of this dojo? Here you either train or stay outside. If you want, go back in. And if you are going out, go out. Don't disturb the others. Together, we headed outside. It's not fair, my persona thought jealously. They've stayed. Why can't we? But, of course, I didn't say anything aloud. Chapter 5. We spent almost a whole hour waiting for the only bus in that district, strenuously tamping down the patch of ground that was called the bus stop. But the bus didn't come. So we walked to the tramway, which the locals said was fairly close, only a 30 or 40-minute walk. But because we weren't familiar with local ditches and potholes, we spent an hour and a half getting there. However, nobody paid attention to the unpleasant circumstances. Everybody excitedly shared their impressions of the training. So, said Kostya, smiling, are we going to the next training? Almost simultaneously, we all said, yes. I don't know about you, said Andre, the biggest fan of martial arts among us, but I think I found what I wanted, at least for now. Cool training. Yes, Kostya interrupted him. Today I learned a lot more than in the whole month of our wandering around other schools. The guys nodded in agreement. Suddenly Slava stopped, tapped himself on the forehead, and said with horror, Shoot, we forgot to ask how much it costs. Andre placed his hand on Slava's shoulder and reassured him. Don't worry, old man, I asked Sensei, he said, the more the better, but not more than 5 rubles. Preference will be given to pure gold of royal coinage. Everybody laughed. Slava even took a deep breath of relief, which was understandable because he was a good guy, but from a poor family. He could not afford to pay for the training in the other schools. To pay 15 or 20 rubles a month was a real fortune for him. Loudly recalling some episodes that happened during the training and the teacher's funny jokes, we didn't even notice how we arrived at the tram stop. Chapter 6. The working week had begun. We got very interested in the vagus nerve story and body innervations in general. For the remaining days of the week, we tried to find out details from our biology and anatomy teachers. But they didn't give us any concrete answers, saying only that most likely it had to do with advanced anatomy, which was studied in medical universities. This fanned the fire of our interest even more, and gave us an impulse to search for these kinds of books through our friends and relatives. All that time, I was trying hard to search through my memory in order to figure out where I knew Sensei from. I even took the time to go through all my family photo albums. But my attempts were in vain. As before, life went on as a continuous search for answers to unknown questions. We could hardly wait for the next training. So as not to be late, we departed 2 hours early. When our group arrived at the gym, we were surprised to discover that we weren't first, even though there was still half an hour until training started. There were 30 people already waiting, like us, unwilling to miss something interesting. Our guys, getting acquainted with some of them, jokingly came to the conclusion that, in comparison with those poor guys, we had quite an easy journey. Because they lived in such distant districts that they had to spend almost half a day getting there, changing transportation a couple of times and wearing out their souls walking several miles. And only a few lucky ones drove here in their own cars. So guys, Andre concluded, I guess we can show off seeing as we are locals. Sensei arrived soon after, surrounded by a group of guys. People started to smile and act friendly. Separate groups merged into a single crowd to greet the teacher as he entered the open gym. We also got caught up in this wave of good feelings. But our joy didn't last long. At the very beginning of the warm-up, 2 respectable-looking men walked in and, approaching Sensei, began whispering something to him in a familiar way. Having agreed upon something, the teacher entrusted the senior senpai to continue the training and, slipping a jacket on right over his kimono, walked out with them. From that point forward, endless suffering of our extremities began. The senior senpai, obviously planning to train us the same way he trained his muscular body, carried out a warm-up in such a tough tempo, as if we were being trained for a gold medal. There was such a difference between Sensei with his graduated exercises and the senior senpai, who tried to make us Olympic champions with a full set of medals before teacher returned. At the end of the warm-up, we heard the command to relax, which for some reason was called the dead body pose by senpai. People in the gym, including my persona, fell down to the floor with such a loud sound that it really looked like exhausted dead bodies were lying all around. Later, I found out that the senpai interpreted some commands in an unusual way because he was a policeman. After that exhausting warm-up, we started to follow our chief instructor's basic exercises of mastering blows, blocks, and stances. I felt as if I was in the Japanese army, where soldiers executed commands in an exact and simultaneous manner, counting loudly in their native language. When Sensei walked in, my persona breathed a sigh of relief. He took his jacket off and continued the training as if nothing had happened. Noticing a mistake made by a young man standing in the first row, he corrected him courteously. "The correct blow should be delivered with this part," he said as he circled the area of bones on the forefinger and middle finger. "This way. You shouldn't use these 2 neighboring fingers, ring finger and pinky finger, because an incorrect blow can seriously damage your wrist." Addressing the crowd, he added, "You have to work long and hard on yourselves not just to correctly deliver blows, but so as not to harm yourselves. A straight fist blow, as I have already said, is one of the basic martial arts techniques. And without thorough preparation, the fist can be easily hurt. If you practice the correct blow every day, the flexor tendons of the fingers, which are located over here, will part over the sides of the metacarpophalangeal articulations of the second and the third fingers, in such a way that the bones will become protected and dense. Then, will you be able to deliver blows easily without harming yourselves?" Someone then asked, "In order to develop our joints in such a way, should we start hitting something very hard?" "No need for such a sacrifice," objected Igor Mikhailovich. "Start hitting a punching bag. Or if somebody doesn't have one, use a sandbag. I'm sure everyone can make one at home. But what's important is to develop the blow every day, gradually increasing speed. And don't be lazy. Really work conscientiously, at full capacity. Then results won't take long to appear." The training ended with another demonstration of new techniques from the tiger style and practice of the previous moves. Again, after the training, Puffy Dumpling glued himself, there is no other way to say it, to Sensei with his questions. There were many people around who wished to talk to Sensei or to listen to him. But Dumpling impudently made his way through the surrounding crowd, including us, and took the teacher aside, obviously considering his question the most important. Giving up waiting for the end of their conversation, we went home. Chapter 7. A couple of days later, we got good news. Somehow, Kostya managed to get the University Manual of Anatomy through friends of his parents. Our joy was infinite. First, of course, we satisfied our curiosity about the vagus nerve by touching and feeling its routes in our bodies. Kostya wasn't too shy during this experiment and conducted his diagnostics right on Tatiana, making her squeak and giving rise to a squall of jokes from us. Then we examined the structure of our hands more thoroughly, and later we started to examine in detail, with evident interest, our bones, muscles, tendons, nerves, organs, and brain. I can't say that I didn't know it all before. In general, we studied all of this during anatomy classes, but it was the first time that I looked at it from a different point of view, and it was the first time I was interested in it, not because of school, but rather to know it for myself. I really wanted to examine my muscles and joints in order to understand why and how we move. How do muscles take part in our exercises, and how is it reflected on our internal organs? What happens during the blow? What is pain from the physiological point of view? Why do people suffer at all? And finally, what is going on in my own brain? Perhaps the last thought was the most important, because subconsciously it had been tormenting me. The guys commented on what we had seen during the training just as passionately, but they were motivated by their own reasons. We agreed unanimously that we didn't know anything in this sphere, and that we should fill this gap in our knowledge together. In order to do this, we spontaneously created a special card game. We drew separate cards for bones, muscles, blood and nerve vessels, the lymphatic system, organs, and the brain. Then we made attempts to put the puzzle together, one by one, trying to identify them not just by name, but also by the corresponding functions. At first, it was hard, but the experience was accompanied by such jokes and such an excited atmosphere that, whether you wanted to or not, you'd remember. Before the next training session, we formulated a couple of questions on biomechanics of the blow, and decided to ask Sensei after the training in order to find a reason to stay longer. But that day, life itself gave us an opportunity to do this without our secret conspiracy plan. At the end of the training, Sensei organized sparrings. People sat down on the floor, creating a big circle, and fighters were selected and invited by Sensei 2 by 2 into its center. Andre was chosen, and his opponent was a novice, also brawny and athletically built. After making a traditional bow to each other, the guys started the fight. For some time, they fought as equals. But Andre turned out to be faster and nimbler, and that enabled him to win. The approving clap of Sensei meant the end of the fight. Our guy helped his competitor stand up. Bowing to each other and to the teacher, they took their places. And when more serious fighters began to walk out onto the improvised ring, Andre couldn't stand watching. Inspired by his recent victory, he volunteered to fight again. He lost almost immediately. This incident greatly fanned his disappointment with himself. Infected by his emotional mood, our group worked up the courage, and we asked Sensei if we could stay for additional training. The teacher answered, smiling, without objections. "You know the law of this dojo. If you want to train, you stay and train." That day, fortune was on our side because Dumpling was not present at the training to irritate us with his importunity. Access to Sensei was free, and we could ask him about all aspects of the training that interested us. While the majority of the crowd was leaving, all the rest were perfecting their weak sides of the blows. The ones we named speedy guys worked on their own level, and the rest of us on our own. But Sensei was closely watching all and correcting the mistakes he noticed. In the already deserted building, he showed us new kata, shadowboxing, which united the speed of undercuts, blows, overturns, and sharp withdrawals. When I started to practice them, Sensei suddenly came up to me from behind and, putting his hand on my shoulder, said, "And you better not do this." I turned to him in surprise. "Why?" At this moment, our eyes met at a close distance. I had such a drilling feeling, as if someone were looking through me from head to toe with an X-ray machine. I'd never seen such a gaze. It was very unusual, piercing, and strange. Because that answer puzzled me a little. I stood quite confused, not knowing what to say. After a short silence, he finally added, "It would be better for you to do these kata." Sensei showed me movements that smoothly changed one into another, with deep breathing following them. All this time I was repeating after him almost automatically, and when he went to help others, endless questions started to flash in my head. What did he mean? Can it be that he knows about my diagnosis? But how? I didn't tell any of my friends, and so far I didn't show it in any way during training. And during this process of thinking, I made an unbelievable discovery. At school, home, at ballroom dances, I sometimes had a sudden, throbbing, continuous headache. But here, no matter how much I tortured my body, this headache never appeared. Why? What is the reason for this? While I was deep in thought working on new techniques, I didn't notice everyone crowding around Sensei, having interrupted their exercises. And when my persona finally realized it, I joined the listeners in order not to miss something important. "Can you tell us how we can learn a technique of the real blow? Is it just by training our muscles?" Andre asked. "No. First of all, by training your brain," Sensei replied. "And how is that?" "Well, to be clearer, let's put it this way. A muscle is like a mechanism that executes its function. It has certain programs coming from the brain in the form of neuron impulses. As a result of the work of such programs, signals arise in the brain that cause contractions of a group of muscles. Thus, it results not only in movements of extremities, but also in complex moving acts. It means that our training leads to a purposeful perfection of our brain and therefore of our muscles. The point is that the better and faster the trained brain works, the better and faster the muscles work." "And what about the highest mastery of martial arts fighters?" Kostya asked, joining the discussion. "I've read somewhere that masters can deliver a blow before they even think of it. How does it happen, and why?" "Well, guys, you touch upon such a serious subject, but I'll try to explain in a few words. The trick is not to simply train your muscles, but to imagine a concrete situation, an image of your opponent. And the most important thing is to know exactly where you hit, into which tissue, and what is happening inside of that body. What's the power level of the blow, and so forth. If a man strikes thoughtlessly, just to practice, then all his efforts are in vain. A true fighter, while practicing on a makiwara, first of all works with an image. He imagines how the opponent opens up, and at that moment he delivers a blow, being conscious of all possible consequences. In other words, he trains his brain. "And what happens in the brain during that?" one of the senior guys asked. "The brain evaluates the situation through visual perception, analyzes it, and makes a decision. Then it sends that command to the cerebellum, or, in other words, to the motion center. And from there, through the nerves, the corresponding signal arrives into the muscles. All that activity is being fixed in the memory. Then, during the fight, this memory unconsciously returns, but without a complex chain of analysis and commands in the brain. In other words, when an opponent just opens up, a master has already counteracted automatically. Let's say it's a different frame of mind, a different innervation, and different workings of the brain. Does it happen on a subconscious level from the physiological point of view?" asked Kostya, showing off his erudition. "You are absolutely right. Complex reflex motion reactions occur now on the level of unconditional reflex," said Sensei, smiling. He added, "In the school anatomy program, such things are described as conditional and unconditional reflexes. The unconditional are genetically designed by nature. They determine the regulation of the internal environment of the body and preservation of the species. And conditional reflexes include the acquired reflexes. arising as a result of accumulated experience and new skills. But even they are based on unconditional reflexes. Human beings have a lot of unconditional reflexes, connections, reactions, regulating the spinal cord, the hindbrain, and the midbrain, the subcortical sections of cortexes of the cerebral hemispheres, and the cerebellum. "And is this the highest art that you told us about in the beginning?" Andre asked with excitement. "No, it's only a first step to real mastery. In the highest art, the major work is based on foresight. It is the work of epiphysis, which is located above the cerebellum in the epithalamus area of the thalamencephalon." "And is epiphysis just a section of white matter?" asked Kostya. "No, it's the so-called pineal gland that weighs only 1 carat. However, it plays a huge role in the vital activity of the body. It is one of the most mysterious parts of the human brain, and of the human as a whole. Unfortunately, science doesn't know anything about its true functions." "And who does know?" asked curious Kostya. "Those who need to know," Sensei answered with a sly smile and went on. "So, working on foresight, a master subconsciously develops the ability to catch his opponent's thoughts. It means that, as soon as the opponent thinks about striking somewhere, the master has already simultaneously taken the exact counteraction that is necessary. All this happens unconsciously, in a split second. I wonder if only masters of martial arts encounter these phenomena of instantaneous velocity," Andre asked thoughtfully. "Why?" "Not only. Many people often face these phenomena of the psyche. Some acquire it after long special training. For example, circus acrobats that catch knives or arrows at great speed. Other people have experienced the influence of unconditional reflexes in their lives. Let's say you are seriously scared by someone or something, for example by a dog. You can momentarily execute a series of movements. And only later, when the danger has passed, you realize how fast you have done it. This ability is inherent in a human from the very beginning. Otherwise, people wouldn't have survived in ancient times when they had to save themselves by running from mammoths, saber-toothed tigers, or other predators." We stood silently, enchanted by Sensei's words. And then we were suddenly interrupted by somebody knocking on the door. It caught me off guard, and everything inside of me contracted. It didn't sound like the knock of someone out for an evening walk. Sensei calmly approached the door and opened it under the watchful eyes of our group. "Oh, it's good that I've caught you here," an unknown man greeted him, shaking his hand. "I was just about to look for you at home. You see, there is this case." "All right, wait a second," remarked Sensei. Turning to us, he said, "Guys, you have 15 more minutes and then we have to go home." Half an hour later, we were standing outside waiting for the others. Igor Mikhailovich closed the gym and quickly said goodbye to us, then drove off in a car. Well, I was angry with myself. I wanted to ask Sensei after the training about his mysterious because, but it didn't work out. I should have asked him in the gym, but there are too many curious ears over there. That's the trouble. On the way home, everyone thought about their own experiences. And this wasn't a strange thing. After such trainings, there was always something to think about. Some of us thought silently, and some aloud. For almost half of the journey, Andre was trying to convince us, or most likely himself, that he had lost the sparring just by accident. "It's a pity that I didn't have nunchaku with me. Never mind, I will bring them to the next training. And then I'll show what I can do." That spectacle promised to be really thrilling as we knew how good Andre was with nunchaku. It was his strong point.